Hello there. My name is Monica Burns, and welcome to Technology Essentials in Education. Today's episode is all about simplifying professional development with on demand tools, and you'll hear from our guest, Naomi Church. We dive into the future of teacher learning together and her background as both a consultant and her work leading Learning Forward Florida really gives her a unique perspective on what makes professional development actually stick for educators. We talk about how to move away from a one size fits all approach to more comprehensive professional learning experiences for educators. If you are curious about the difference between PD and PL, if you are providing professional learning experiences for educators or curious about on-demand PD, this episode is for you. This episode is brought to you by Jotform. Jotform provides an all-in-one solution to streamline administrative tasks, enhance community engagement, and foster innovation. Using their no-code drag-and-drop forms and workflows, your teams can securely collect and store data, automate tasks, and collaborate on team resources. Educational institutions are also eligible for a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. Jotform.com/enterprise/education. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to chat about simplifying professional development with on-demand tools today. But before we get into all of that, can you share with listeners a little bit about your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Sure. My name is Naomi Church. I'm an educational consultant, speaker, and the founder of Growing Minds Consulting. And really, what I do is I design professional learning systems that hopefully lead to changes in practice with a focus on universal design for learning,
Mhm.
effective math instruction, MTSS, and adult learning theory. And my day to day spans because I work with both K 12 systems and education organizations. So I partner with schools and districts to design and deliver PL, anything from keynotes and workshops to on demand learning pathways and systems of universally designed support, which I'll definitely talk more about. And really, I'm focused on helping teams to move beyond one time events and into learning that is flexible and
Mhm.
actionable. Um, and it's probably also worth noting that I'm the past president of Learning
Mhm.
Forward Florida. So that's the Florida affiliate of the International Learning Forward organization. And that has really changed the way that I think
Mhm.
about professional learning as an ongoing process rather than as the one off event. So, across all of my work leading that organization, with the companies, schools, districts,
Mhm.
the through line is designing learning experiences that are engaging, inclusive, and accessible.
And that's what I'm hoping we'll get into today, right? Like what it looks like to think about an experience that really sticks for someone, that is part of their ongoing learning over the course of the year or over several years, of their professional career. So when you hear that phrase, on demand professional development, what comes to mind?
So, immediately what comes to mind is the difference between PD or professional development and PL or professional learning.
Mhm.
So, PD is a one time event. It's often thought of as something that's done to teachers.
Mhm.
And it might be inspiring. It could be like the best keynote ever or the
Mhm.
best online course ever. But on its own, it doesn't really change practice a whole lot.
Mhm.
Professional learning, on the other hand, is ongoing. It's a process, not a moment. It's
Mhm.
iterative, it's the day to day work of reflecting, adjusting, and growing. So, on-demand PD becomes really powerful when it's designed as part of that larger professional learning ecosystem instead of just being an isolated resource or piece. And I like to talk about universally designed support
Hmm.
here because I mean, we know that in classrooms, students are variable learners, right?
Hmm.
We know that there's going to be a wide range of students that show up, but the same is true in any kind of professional learning, right? Adults are just learners. Any challenges that they had as kids usually don't totally disappear in
Hmm.
adulthood. We have plenty of adults that have challenges when they come to learning. And so it's about honoring that and supporting them as people and giving them the opportunity to engage with the learning in a way that is flexible and works best for them.
And I think so much of what, we as educators do when we think about students, say in a K-12 environment, right, is want to design experiences for them that meet their needs. And we know this about kids, right, about students, right, that their needs are different. The way that they learn or like to engage with content is so different. So I think it's an important reminder, like you mentioned, that we also see this with adult learners when we think about professional learning or those moments of professional development that they may partake in. So, what pain points do you hear most often from educators about those traditional professional development experiences?
Yeah, I mean, look, every August, if you're on social
Mhm.
media at all, what we see is a whole plethora of memes, right? About PD being a joke, that um, it's something that they're not looking forward to because
Mhm.
traditionally it's something that's done to teachers and not designed for them. And it feels disconnected from the reality of what's happening in their classrooms.
Yeah.
So, another big issue there is that the assumption, like we were talking about with variability, is that this one session, this one meeting, webinar, whatever, is going to meet everybody's needs. And of course, that's not true. Beyond the learner individual variability, their roles are different, right? Like the
Mhm.
special ed teacher versus the music
Yeah.
teacher versus the fourth grade gen ed teacher all walk in with very different contexts and
Mhm.
goals. And they need to know how the learning applies to their specific role and their day to day work when they have to go through the extra mental bandwidth of trying to fit it
Right.
into their
Mhm.
own context, in addition to navigating the learning experience, it's a lot harder to get to implementation.
Yeah, and I like how you frame that about we want something that's for teachers, right? Not happening to them. And, I know from my experience on both sides of that, right? Like you want to feel seen and heard. You want to make sure that there are examples and things that really connect to the work that's happening in your classroom, right? You don't want to be in a space where, this is not the right time, right? Or I'm not kind of in the thick of it. This doesn't meet the need that I have right now. And so as we think about on-demand professional learning, what might count as an on-demand tool that can help, support professional learning in a school today?
So I think of on demand tools for professional learning really in two ways. It has to have access and timing.
Mhm.
So it's anything that educators can engage with when the need is real, not just when it's scheduled on the
Mhm.
three planning days of the year,
Yeah.
right? And so that can look like self paced online workshops or short targeted modules that teachers can go back to over time.
Mhm.
It could be recorded webinars that can be right revisited during planning and implementation. A little outside the box, it could also be virtual office hours
Mhm.
where educators can meet with an expert or the workshop facilitator to ask questions and troubleshoot those critical points when they're actually trying to implement, right? A
Mhm.
lot of things sound great when you're in the learning. And then when you try to do it, something feels off. And so being able to talk to somebody at just the right time is a huge piece.
Hmm.
Another uh, component is the resource repositories,
Yeah.
right? I want to be able to go back and dig deeper into these articles or podcasts or whatever. And so resource repositories can be housed in an LMS or some other kind of shared platform or folder. Another favorite of mine is membership sites like
Yeah.
yours,
Hmm.
so that there's that ongoing access, right? Like there's so much information there. And sure, I could go through it all, but man, it's so much more meaningful when you're able to access just the right video or reading
Hmm.
when you're really in the thick of implementation.
Yeah, and I think that's really where the on-demand piece can come in handy for someone who's has a particular pain point. They're struggling with something today, right? Not maybe down the line in the future. Like sometimes it may feel like for a professional development session that's like, this is interesting, but might not be what I need today, right? For
Yeah.
the work that I'm doing. And I really like that you mentioned virtual office hours because I think that can be underrated, right? Or it might not feel right as as part of what we're used to, I guess, right? In education, I'm working with a group of New York educators, coaches right now, and I see them, once a month. And we have a flexible calendar of kind of what we talk about, right, over the course of the year, kind of revisiting it every quarter. And then part of our time together really is that Q&A to say, like, what's happening right now? Like, we talked about this thing that I hope is timely. We planned it out, right, to be responsive, but also like what happened yesterday that you want to bring to the table that we can talk about, right, and think out loud about together. So I love that idea of having something where you might have a structure but it's complemented with something that feels very in the moment for someone. So
Yeah,
as
it's
we
such
yeah.
a
Mhm.
critical component, right? A lot of times when districts book speakers, it's for a series of workshops or
Mhm.
webinars, and then this piece of like that live in the moment interaction gets skipped.
Yeah.
A lot of, there's funding, there's time, there's a lot of
Mhm.
barriers, but it is such a critical component of this like bigger professional learning ecosystem so that people can see how the pieces fit together.
Absolutely, right? And it's gotta be more than just, the one time, right, or the watching component, right? It can be much more responsive if we've been intentional about the interactivity, which is kind of what I wanna get to in this next question I have for you. I love webinars that are live. I love jumping into the chat, right, and talking or sharing or asking a question, but I also find a lot of value sometimes in watching a recording that I can put at 1.25 or 1.5, right? Or maybe say, you know what, I see what the person's doing in this section. I'm going to jump ahead because I really came for, this other piece, right? So, what does effective on demand professional development, need to include to help you move from watching to doing?
Yeah, to doing to get that coveted change in practice, it really has to be part of a larger professional learning ecosystem, and those connections need to be made explicit. Right?
Hmm.
It's not on the learner, it's not on the educator, whoever the audience is, to make those connections. Whoever is scheduling the learning or
Hmm.
facilitating the learning has to say, hey, here's how this piece, this webinar, this article ties into this whole bigger picture. Because the bottom line is that nobody has time for one more thing on their plates,
Yeah.
right? I worked with a very large school district in Florida, and the PD director there said, we don't have plates here, we have platters because our plates overflowed a long time ago. Right? Like nobody's looking for one more thing to do.
Right.
And so we're not going to make any changes unless we see how everything fits together, right? How is it tied to the goals? How is it uh, tied to the intentionality of what we're really trying to focus on? And so maybe that looks like a webinar paired with a resource repository that they
Hmm.
can return to during planning, or maybe that is that webinar tied to a continued conversation in a PLC
Right.
where they can talk through what they're doing, what they're noticing. Maybe it includes prompts for reflection, opportunities to actually test the strategy, or a
Mhm.
safe space to ask questions like those office hours. It's putting all the little pieces together, and just like we do for kids, making those connections overt.
Yeah, and just the intention right there, right? You have to be intentional if you're taking someone's time, right, and scheduling a professional learning experience or a professional development experience within, a larger initiative that you have. If you want them to carve out this 1 hour for this webinar, right, where does that fit in the larger scheme of things, right? Do they also have an hour, the very next day to put this, into action? I sometimes do, professional development sessions, like a webinar over the summertime. And I tell people, like, I know there's a lot going on, right? You may want to take this, resource page I'm giving you now and attach it to an appointment on your own calendar for, September or October. That way you'll see it pop up. You'll have the link to the thing we talked about. And maybe right then it's a good moment for you to try it out, right, in the context of what you're doing. It's not a perfect way, right, to give a next step. I wish it was a little more timely or embedded, but at least it can help things not get lost or just feel like it was this one off, right, and one moment of time. A quick note from the presenter of today's episode, Jotform. Jotform lets you build a form in minutes. Student survey forms, homework submission forms, online quizzes, and so much more. You can start from scratch, or if you want to get a head start, check out their collection of free form templates designed with teachers, schools, and districts in mind. Learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. Jotform.com/enterprise/education.
I love that, the tying it to a calendar. I have not thought of telling people to do that, but I certainly will now because, yeah, that email with the resource folder and all the links in it, it gets lost. And 2 months later, when things are really busy, it's hard to go digging. But yeah, man, if it's tied to a calendar invite or to yourself, even,
Yeah.
that is the prompt to go back and
Mhm.
revisit.
I will say I usually tell them, like, put some emojis in it. That way you don't freak out that you're late for something that's not actually happening. You know how we get those like, oh no, where am I supposed to be when we hear the calendar notification on our phone. That's the one caveat I usually add to that to people. But I do think it helps, extend the experience and kind of put a timestamp. Like this is going to be right relevant for you. Maybe not today, right? Maybe you were asked to come today to do this, but once you're in the thick of this, right, in 6 weeks, right, this is something that could really save you time or be useful, right, for your group. And speaking of things that can be helpful and useful, when it comes to making professional development sessions really actionable for someone, what role do templates, examples, and those, ready to use materials that might be in a repository, like you mentioned, where do they come into play?
Yeah, all those things help teachers to see what it looks like in practice.
Hmm.
Right, like the exemplars, even like we do for kids in a
Yeah.
classroom, they help to reduce that cognitive overload, they clarify expectations, and they really give a concrete starting point, and so then it can be adapted into their own context,
Yeah.
into my art class, into my first grade class. I have the starting point, and then I can make the adjustments that are meaningful and relevant. Um, and from a PL perspective that
Yeah.
also honors adult learners, right?
Hmm.
They respect teachers' expertise by providing support without scripting
Yeah.
or like pushing for compliance,
Hmm.
right? Because that never goes over
Right.
well.
And it's a fine line, right? To say, like, this is how you might structure. And I found, especially as a classroom teacher where we were for several years, right, being handed, a curriculum, with a script, right? And you want to do things right, whatever right means. And, you have to really feel supported by your administration, or whoever is helping lead the charge for an initiative to say, like, what does doing this right mean, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you are reading this, right, like a script, but it means you have this template. You have this as an example of how you might frame some of, your conversations with students. And I think sometimes, that might be an assumption someone makes when they are sharing resources, but giving someone something like a template, like a couple examples, right, can help them see what this looks like in action if it's framed in a good way.
For sure.
And for, coaches and team leads, how can they support teachers who are learning on demand?
I think that the biggest thing they can do is to help create the conditions for successful implementation. And so, first and foremost, they need to be in the space of being a support and not an evaluator,
Mhm.
because coaching doesn't work when people think they're being evaluated. The way that they teach and respond is different. It most certainly was when I was in
Mhm.
the classroom and when I was a coach. Right. And
Mhm.
so that part of creating those conditions for success includes really being in the space of I'm a support for you. It could be asking the right reflection questions
Mhm.
to help connect the learning with the doing. What are you trying? What's working? What questions are coming up? Right? All of that can make a big difference. They can help by curating and organizing the resources so that we can reduce some of the overwhelm that is kind of sitting everywhere. Um, and really, I think a piece that is often forgotten about is that coaches, anybody who's supporting the learning process, the professional learning facilitators, really need to reinforce that learning is iterative. Like
Mhm.
the first time you do this, it's not
Yeah.
going to be perfect, and
Mhm.
that's okay.
Right.
Just like with kids, sometimes we do something and we're like, ooh, I will never do it that way
Yes.
again. And I mean, it kind of depends on what you teach, but I have absolutely said to kids that that didn't make sense. Let me
Right. Yeah,
let
let's
me have a
rewind.
redo. Retry that again.
And I think that's the right attitude to have, in these moments of supporting educators, right, in their, professional learning experiences to make sure they feel supported, that they understand, right, this is a process, right, as opposed to something, right, that's going to be one and done, hopefully. So if a school is starting from scratch and they're looking to, they're exploring an on-demand professional development experience for their teachers, kind of in the midst of maybe a larger initiative that they're working on, what is a realistic first step? What is something that someone listening could try, after hearing our conversation today?
Yeah, first and foremost, ask the educators themselves how they want to be supported,
Mhm.
because that is not done nearly enough. When
Mhm.
schools jump straight into rolling things out without doing this, they often miss the mark. It's unintentional, of course, but
Mhm.
it's missing the mark. So, one of the first things that I do when I'm working with a school or district is I put out a short online survey and I ask them how they prefer to engage with and implement new learning. And so I'll ask something like, what type of support works best for you to implement new learning? Mark your top two choices.
Yeah.
And then I have stuff in there like, um, modeling. Do you want somebody to come to your classroom and show you what it looks like with your kids? Because that's
Right.
a big
Mhm.
barrier, right? Like, this sounds good, but
But it
you
would
have to
never,
see
right.
my
Yeah.
class.
Mhm.
Or I want somebody to observe me and give me constructive feedback. Or I want access to a resource repository. I want PLCs. I want to go to more workshops. I want to go to more webinars. And really administrators are almost always surprised by the results.
Yeah.
Like for I see PLC show up in the top almost every time, and that is something that administrators assume teachers don't want to do, but really most people want to be a part of it when
Yeah.
it's meaningful and not just another meeting out of compliance. So I frame all of that as universally designed support.
Hmm.
Maybe we all attend the first workshop or webinar or do the online course, but then the ongoing support that turns this from professional development into professional learning needs to be universally designed support where we're tuning into how the individual educators want to be supported. Right? As a coach, it's much more meaningful for me to go in and model for just those teachers who would really
Oh,
benefit from
yeah.
that. I don't have to do it for everybody.
And that's such a good reminder for someone who is looking, for that next step, right? Like what might this look like in our learning environment? And really starting by asking educators how they want to be supported is huge and often overlooked, like you said. So as we, wrap up together today, I want to make sure people know where to connect with you, where to follow along with the work that you're doing. There will be links where anyone's listening so they can click on things. But I always think if someone's on the go or has their hands full in the moment and wants to make a mental bookmark, where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work?
Thank you. On social media, I am most active on LinkedIn, and it's just under my name, Naomi Church. I also have a website, growingmindsconsulting.com. And I know that's a mouthful. It's a lot of words. I should have thought about that, but I didn't. But yeah, on my website, it has more about my work. There's a contact tab, so you can contact me directly. There's a blog there where you can get some insights, some of those on demand resources, even.
Well, this has been just super insightful, really actionable for educators who are looking to rethink the way that they support their colleagues. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
This was such a fun conversation, and I want to finish up, like we always do, with a few ways to make this EdTech easy. Traditional PD often feels done to teachers instead of being designed for them. Effective professional learning is ongoing, flexible, and part of a larger ecosystem, not a one off event. On demand tools work best when educators can access what they need when they need it, when they have the opportunity to put it into action when it is real for them, not just on scheduled PD days. Resource repositories, office hours, and webinars help bridge the gap between learning and classroom implementation. If you want to connect with Naomi Church after today, make sure to check out the resources, the show notes for this episode to continue the conversation about on demand PD and professional learning experiences for educators. A big thank you to Jotform, the presenter of today's episode. To learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise, head to jotform.com/enterprise/education.